It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the MSD on 117.8. It's Tuesday, October 29th, and we are ready to start this week and this day together with the Lord. With that, how is everyone doing? I think it's really an exciting week, right? This message this week was just so incredible. And so with that, we have an exciting podcast for you on this Tuesday with Bible Today and 2G Talks. To jump straight into things, this message was really incredible, right? And so hopefully you guys have had a time to kind of reflect on it on Monday. And if you were able to listen to the Monday episode to go over the word review for the Sunday message, right? So I think it goes without saying, and I think it's kind of self-evident, right? I don't know if it really needs to be said, but these messages have been really going deeper and deeper of the last few weeks and these last few months. And there might be different reasons for it. I don't know specifically why God would be giving a deeper message, right? I don't think there's just one reason, but there's a lot of reasons. But ultimately it's to fulfill his will, right? And so this week he gave the message with the title, just as the earth spins, do the work that needs to be done. And I'm sure that for each person, right, listening and depending on where you are in the world, in your life, and currently in your roles and missions, right? Each of us have those respective works, right? So depending on where you may be, right, a different part of the message really hit home for you. But I think there were so many parts to it that I'm sure hit home for all of us that we really need to talk about it, right? So there may be specific things. And so even before the message, there was actually something that I was really thinking about, and then it came up directly in the message. So I was really, really shocked by it. And of course, God's words and his thoughts are always higher and better than whatever ideas that we can come with. So I'm very excited to jump right in and to talk about the word this week. And so part of this conversation for me, jumping straight into the first part of Bible Today is recently we're one of the things that we're working on, maybe one of the roles that God has entrusted us to handle during this period of Providence history is re-education and managing and lecturing second gen, right? Which may not be extremely surprising, but because it's such an important thing, right? Lecturing and managing lives, we're taking the matter very seriously, right? So what can we do, right, to really lecture well and to teach people well? And so I'm sure Rachel may talk about this at some point, but we have an upcoming second gen retreat this winter in American Providence, and that's very exciting. I think typically when you have retreats, it's like a summer retreat, right? But growing up, we actually had quite a few winter retreats, and those are so exciting. They're very different, right? The two, right? Being in the winter, a lot of our winter retreats are more indoors, but you get to spend a lot of cool time, maybe at a cabin or something like that. And so we have a lot of exciting things to in store for this retreat. But it's really interesting because at each of these retreats, we also want to have substantive things to do with the word, right? To teach second generation. And one of the things that something has told us to do recently is to teach the second generation well and to kind of reteach the lessons and such too. So that's something that we've been considering. And so we're okay, we want these kids to learn some of the lessons during this retreat. So what lessons should they learn? What should they learn? And I think the typical conversation we had was to teach them the core lessons, right? Purpose of creation. Let's teach them the rapture. Let's teach them time times half a times and those kinds of things. And we definitely should, right? And I think and this isn't just to do with the retreat or with second generation, but these are lessons that everyone should know, right? And about the Trinity, about three divisions, these kinds of things. But one of the things that comes to mind is that these lessons are actually very deep, right? And they're very important, right? And so like even as we evangelize someone in the world, of course we want to evangelize as many people as possible, but we also know that you can't really sow seeds into the hearts of someone whose like field of the heart is not ready, right? Like someone who who has rocks in their soil, right? Who don't have the fertilizer in their soil, right? Who we haven't tilled the heart yet, right? Who we haven't like kind of like gotten rid of like maybe the imperfections and the things that will hold them from like bearing fruit, right? And so of course sometimes that's hard to distinguish, because when we're evangelizing someone in the world, we may not really know them. But in this instance, right, like with second generation, we may know them a little bit better. And so like one of the things that came to mind was like, wow, like these words are so valuable. But if we just teach it as knowledge, then like would these kids really appreciate it? And would they really know in depth about, like why this is important and what it is that they should know? Right. And like, so this kind of came to the part in this week's message where Susan was talking about how language works, or how heavenly language works, right? Like, because heavenly language is so perfect, you can like accurately and entirely convey what it is that you want to convey to the person, literally by like showing them, right, in the spiritual world, right? Like you don't have like no audible language is used, right? And like what we have on earth that we use to like speak and to write, these are substitutions for like perfect communication. And it totally makes perfect sense. And I think something even explaining about how like when he was evangelizing like in Germany, right, going across the world, he doesn't have time in his life to learn 70 languages. And that makes total sense, because even for us too, like maybe some of you guys know like one or two languages proficiently enough to say that you're good at those two or maybe three languages. But for most people, right, they're like probably best at one language, and maybe like they have a close second or so. But like most people on average probably do not, right, go beyond that. And so it makes total sense, right? And so, this isn't just to do with languages, but just in terms of our communication with people, right? Like when we communicate in ways where people can't understand each other, it's like you're speaking a different language with someone. So like when we're trying to teach someone the Bible study, right, and we're teaching them like the high level advanced stuff, right, when a person's heart and their minds are not ready to receive it, and when like they haven't been prepared in the necessary way, they can't really understand it, and they can't really value it, right? It's like when you're trying to teach an elementary schooler, right, something that like a person getting a specialized degree would learn, right? Like reading a textbook that's intended for college grad students, they can't accept it. They have no idea what they're looking at. And it's not to say that all second gen are at that place where they cannot understand, but like one of the things that I really feel that when you look at Jesus and the thing that Sung did, is that he clearly knew, like they clearly knew the people that they're working with. They knew and they understood that person's heart. And they gave the word to the person so that they would come to realize, right? And that requires knowing that person's heart, their thoughts, their psychology, and their level, right? And so this is very important, right? Like Jesus and something, they don't give an undue burden, right? They don't give a burden that's too heavy for people to carry. And instead, right, like when you look at how Jesus met Peter and how he evangelized, the 12 disciples and the various people, right? The woman by the well, like God spoke to these people through Jesus at their level, resolving their problems, right? And right, even when you see like the story of like him and Peter, he knew the kind of person that Peter was, and he communicated with him in a way that Peter understood, right? And was made to feel that he is the Messiah. And like even the subsequent stories that we look at, like in Peter and the fish, right? Like in Jesus telling Peter to go like fish, right? In order to pay the temple tax, Jesus knew who he was talking to. Right, and Jesus knew how like Peter would understand it and how he would take action in response to what he said. And so in the same way, like when we are teaching newcomers, when we are going out to evangelize, when we're teaching second generation or re-educating like different people, I really feel like you have to like speak in a way that they will understand. And sometimes that requires that you go to the level that they're at, right? And like for some of them, if they have rocks in their field, right, then you have to take those rocks out, right? You have to take, I don't know, like a rake and then get those things out before you plant the seeds, right? And like I'll give a very clear example of this, right? Like a lot of times people, right, like, and I'll be very honest, like second gen especially, they don't fully really understand something, right? Like really fundamentally, like everyone knows, right? You know the basics, right? You know, right? Like what he was sent here to do, like what kind of things, what kind of conditions that he set. You know that the word comes from like him every single week, and like he does X, Y, Z, and like all the things that the kind of the big picture stuff that people say. But fundamentally, people don't really know him that well, right? And this doesn't go just for second generation, but it can happen to all of us, and it probably has happened to probably all of us at some point, right, where we didn't really understand him perfectly, right? But we know that in order to help people to understand, we have to really like make it so that they can connect, that they can figure out the word. And so this is something that I think is extremely important, right? And so one of the examples that comes to mind is like there's two things, right? Like I actually saw like a meme about this, like even in the Christian world, right? And I think this applies to second generation too, because often this is something that I see with leaders and with parents. And so like this has to do with second generation with members too. Like sometimes leaders and parents, they look at their members and they're like, the members need to know this, right? This second gen needs to know this, but they can't figure it out. They can't accept it, right? So one of the Christian equivalents that I've seen, like in memes, is like really strong Western Christians saying that you have to accept that Jesus died for your sins in order to be saved, right? Like if you can't accept that, and if you can't accept that he resurrected, then you don't have salvation, right? Then you don't have this relationship. But the thing that a lot of people have seen with this newer generation, with the younger crowd of even Christians, is that they don't specifically relate to that, right? And so they're like, okay, like there's like people who are working with these young individuals, and they're saying like, okay, they don't seem to relate to that, but as these fundamentalist Christians are saying, of course they have to accept this in order to be saved. So how do you get people who don't relate to it to somehow to accept that? And the starting point that these people have like kind of thought of is, okay, we have to help them to develop a relationship with Jesus first, right? So that they can accept all of the other things. And I think the same thing applies in this context, right? Like basically you're forming the relationship, meaning that you're getting them to understand, like you're like developing that core thing. One of the things, and this will be the last thing for this opening segment, is like when we think about our role as an evangelist, as a lecturer, as a manager, and in this case, right, like taking care of a life, a newcomer or a second generation member, right? It's like, what is our role in that, in this situation, right? In this, like in dealing with these people. Right, and like the thought that came to mind, like while listening to the message and while thinking about this or thinking about the situation, is I see that we're in the position of a matchmaker, right? Because it's not our relationship with this person, but ultimately it's their relationship, this person's relationship with God, with the Trinity, and with the Lord, right? Like, so it's that connection. So that is our job. And like if we come from a place where we can't understand these people, and these people, right, like aren't able to understand God, then the greatest thing that we can do, instead of just trying to teach them everything that we feel like they should know, is to get them to open up their hearts and to connect with God, right? To have that sense of understanding. And and like in the Bible, I feel like one of the reasons why Apostle Paul at the end was someone who was really able to do this successfully, was because he understood the hearts of people well, right? Because he himself, like, I mean, by his own words, right? Like, he himself, by his own, admission, was one of the worst sinners, like, that there were, right, in God's history, like, especially at the time. And so because, like, he started from that place and he was made to understand God's heart and his love and his purpose fulfilled through Jesus, right? Like, he was able to understand everyone, right, from the position, like, from that worst of worst, like, people who were starting at a place that was as bad as his, right, like, persecuting Christianity, persecuting the apostles of Christ, right, to people who were better, and to people who, like, like the 12 were part of the disciples who followed Jesus from the beginning. So he was able to understand everyone from there all the way to those who were, like, really close to Jesus. But a lot of times, like, when you look at like, people who haven't experienced those lows, or can't can't understand the psychology of someone that low, we don't really know how to bring up that person to where God is, and where Jesus is, and where Christ is. And so, like, our job is in the position of a matchmaker. And so when we're in this world with this natural language, right, which isn't like it isn't the language of heaven, and there's miscommunication where people can't understand us, then we do have to put in the work to help people to understand like, what it is that we're really trying to convey in a way that they can understand, and that this is really applicable when it comes to helping someone to understand God and helping someone to understand the Word. I think this is something that we all know. Like, none of this is like this. Like, the word this week is groundbreaking, but some of the things that I'm sharing right now isn't necessarily groundbreaking. But I really hope that this is something that we can think of, because I've had many questions and many conversations with members where they're like, how should I do this for this member? Or how should I do this? Like, whether it's a second generation, a newcomer, they're like, oh, like, they don't seem to be understanding this, or I feel like they need to know this, but they're not really getting it. If they're not getting it, then it's our job as a matchmaker to help this person understand from a perspective that they can understand. Right? We have to use the language that they're familiar with. So anyways, that'll be the first segment for today. And with that, we'll go into our first break. and I don't know if this is becoming a meme somewhere, but and I don't know if it's because I have spoken to members about this, or whether it's because like, these members have been following like, the MSD, and like, have been listening. But I guess it's definitely been out there that I've been really playing Natural Temple a lot. Like, we had, like, October is the month of giving glory, right? And so on Sunday, I joined with the church in Atlanta to give glory in the afternoon. And they were like, Eddie, do you have any, songs you want to sing? And then, like, as a joke, they were like, Natural Temple. And so, if any members from Georgia are listening, shout out to the members in Georgia. And I don't know if it's because they were listening to the MSC or because of our previous conversations, but it was really funny, like, to see. So anyways, because of that, I've been actively making an attempt to, choose new songs. And so with a break for today, we will be going into the song My Heart Does Not Change.
Through the desert
Yes, hope everyone enjoyed that break. And so, for the second kind of like overall discussion for Bible today, like going back to the word, right? There was like, man, there were like so many things from the message that were great. Like, I don't know what big topic was like the most important for you, like, the concept of like the heavenly languages, or like revelations, right, of what your body is doing, right, like through parables and dreams, and like things happening in nature that are parables for your reality as well, right, or like about the auspicious locations, right, of Korea, like between like China and Japan, like, and with the kind of the thing being alluded about confident ignorance and what could allow providence to happen on a great scale. Like, man, like so many different things, right? So yeah, like what of like all of the topics came up was like the most important for you, right? Like something you even talked about, magnification and miniaturization, and like there's so many different things, right? And so I think for me, like, I want to get into the magnification and miniaturization thing, because, like, while like this isn't a standalone lesson in the 30 principles, I feel like this is a principle that can be applied to literally everything, right? Like within like providence and within God's will. Like this is like such a core concept, and I think like, I don't know about for you guys, but for me, like while learning the 30 principles and like relearning it and learning it over and over and over again, I don't know at what point that this principle was really emphasized to me, and that like I really like saw like just how incredible it is, right? So like there's probably different times where this is really emphasized. And I know like even the dream where Jesus had something draw, like miniaturization and magnification, right? That's like a huge thing that we like talk about too, right? But actually, one of the places where like I think I saw this was in like the short like poem book, right? The Lamplight of the Sun book, where like something like is like recounting a story from his childhood where he encounters a problem. I think this problem came up in the word recently too, right? About like the time where like his mom asked him to get some eggs, and like he bought them, and he like was hurrying back, but because he was hurrying back, he realized that the eggs broke, right? And so like he was really sad and disheartened, right, as a child seeing this, right? But like he like shares a story, and he says, right, like that he saw that like for every problem as big as the earth, there is an answer as big as the universe, right? And like it was kind of really expressed in this very poetic way, and so I think that really made a deep impression. But like when you start to think about like all of the 30 principles, and like the Sunday message, right, and the components, right, well, like within like this week's message too, like when you apply it to our life, and then when you like miniaturize it for like individual things, and then you magnify it to a larger scale, like it's like there's just so many implications, like so many different things, right? Like well, like even like within a person's life, miniaturizing it on the scale of one day, right, and then magnifying a little bit to 1 week or a month and a year, and then a person's lifetime, and expanding even from like one person's lifetime to like the 1,000 years of like the complete Testament history, right? Like there's like so many different ramifications, right? Like if you live perfectly on one day, right, like expanding that to living perfectly for a week, and then living perfectly for a month, and then living perfectly for a year, and then living perfectly for a lifetime, right? There's all of these different principles, and I think this is like such a big topic for me. In particular, I think this is impactful because the problems that we address on a smaller scale can help us to understand the problems on a larger scale. And the things that happen on a large scale can help us to resolve and understand the problems the smaller things, right, that sometimes we get tripped up on, right? So when we like start to ask these questions about our life, about like issues and questions that we have about like, oh, how should I live my life? How should I do X, Y, and Z? Like you look at God's larger purpose to determine how you should like live your life, right? Like people, even I think even within Providence, even after learning the word, like when they're going through a period in their life where they don't really know what they're doing, right? They ask the question like, oh, like how should I live my life? Like what should I do? Like what should I do in terms of my future, in terms of my career, in terms of my family, in terms of my mission? And we get like lost in that, like in the forest, right, in the thick of the trees, and we forget about God's larger purpose of creation, right? Like we forget about His will, and we forget that when we like fulfill God's will, all of these individual questions get fulfilled, right? Like even in this week's message, like something really talked about how the greatest thing that we could do within our life is to like understand the Lord, is to meet Him, and is to follow Him, right? That is the single greatest fruit, right? Like, and that nothing that we do in like comparison will like amount to that, right? Like the highest work that we can do is knowledge of the Lord, right? It is the greatest fruit, right? From like John 6:29 and Philippians like 3:8, right? And so, right, like, and like when you think about it on a large scale, sometimes people forget about the smaller things, right? They're like, okay, like that's the biggest thing, but how does that resolve the smaller things? Right? And like the answer is, right, like that, like when you think about like the individual small things, like we tend to think that like are what jobs that we'll have, what careers that we'll have, that those are like the big important questions. And that may be like an important question to answer, but one of the things that I was like thinking of, I think maybe this was like last Saturday or so. Oh, yeah, this was in response to the proverb that came, like one of the morning proverbs. I think it was the first one. And I think this was like a really shocking morning proverb too. I think the first one, either on Saturday or Friday, was that like even if technological advancements like keep like growing more and more like in the world, if people don't address the fundamental question of their life, right, about the purpose of creation and about the salvation of their spirit, then no matter how advanced the world may get, like it will not resolve the crucial thing that people have to know, right? So this is going back to the scriptures from John and from Philippians, right? But this was so true, right? Like because like even for me, like thinking about like with law school, one of the things that I kind of want to do, but I'm like completely open to leaving it up to God's will, right? But one of the things that I do want to do is probably work for a company, right? In-house at a company, right? That's one of the things that come to mind because one, I'm kind of adverse to the things that the government does, right? I think government is so slow and is like so behind on the times, right? Like I've worked at a law firm before and dealing with the courts, right? And I feel like this is probably not just isolated to the United States, but courts are slow and they're old and they just like they don't even make technological advancements. They use like machines, right? Like from like over 50 years ago in order to accomplish things that like you could do now on your cell phone, right? So there's like all of these things, and so because of that, rather than working like within like a law firm or like within like a courthouse, I would rather work for like the legal department of a company. But like that being said, like I mentioned, I'm totally open to leaving according to God's will, because I feel like His thoughts and His ways, and ultimately, if He provides the opportunity, it'll be much greater than like than any stupid idea that I can come up with. But that being said, right, like because I was thinking this, right, that I kind of want to work for a company like in this field where like it's everything is new and like they're constantly developing things, and they're like using the newest technology and things like that. Like this proverb really hit home for me, right? That yeah, sure, like those things are good and they can keep developing, but if you're not addressing the fundamental things, right, if you're not doing the spiritual work, then it's like really like of no value, right? It's of no greatest value. And so for me, that part was just so important because it's so true, right? This is the more important thing. And I think it's something that it reminded me that I should never forget it, right? That like miniaturizing and magnifying this, right? Miniaturizing, right? Like the fact that this is the greatest thing to my life, I should never forget that like the physical pursuits are never the end goal, right? That the career, right? The specific career that you can have is not the end goal. Like, you know, and the pursuits of that, right? Whether it's money and financial security, or even not just financial security, but just being like prosperous, right? Like being financially prosperous, and also achieving great things, like having great accolades and achievements in the world, or fame and power. Those things, like in Providence, we already know that those things aren't like the most important, but sometimes we forget it, right? And like the nature of it's kind of concealed to us, right? Like, of course we know that money is not the end thing, but when we're not thinking about it clearly, when we're not being wise about it, then like we start to think of money, and we start to have like thoughts and actions that, like, when you break it down, is thinking that money is the end, right? Money is the most important thing. And I know this happens to everyone, right? It may not necessarily be money. It may be about our position in our work. It may be about the conditions that our work affords for us, right? And you know, this doesn't even strictly have to do with our careers. It may be with our missions at church, our standing within our family, right? Like where we stand, like within our social circle, within our friends, like, you know, feeling like people, you know, have to listen to us, or that, you know, we want a better position, like within our social circle that we have. Like all of these kind of things come up, right? And we know one of the other principles is that, like, all of these things, like when we become so consumed by it, or even bothered by it, it's kind of like placing idols, right, before God, right? And like, while we know these things, when we clearly think about it, we often forget. So this principle of miniaturization and magnification is really important. And, you know, the biggest thing that this applies to, that we, you know, always have to do, is, I would say, like, you know, with the purpose of creation, like miniaturizing the purpose of creation, right? Like of a God's will, like on our life, so that we never forget, the ultimate, like, larger picture. All right. So anyways, like, this principle is important, and I'm sure that that everyone has thought about this to different extents. Pastor Sky probably has, you know, considered this, you know, in various different things, and has spoken to you guys about it too. And if there's like a particular way that either, you know, miniaturization, magnification has applied to you, or like what kind of things that you thought about it, like when you first learned it, right? Because for most people listening, you know, I'm sure that you were evangelized from the world, and so like you may more vividly remember the first time you learned it than I did, right? Because I really don't remember, like, the first time I learned it, or how I responded to it. And maybe it also wasn't like that deep of a realization at the time. At what point did it become a deep realization? Was it never really a deep realization? Like, did it just seem to make so much sense that you were like, yeah, whatever? And so, like, if so, like, you know, I would love to share, like, what people's reactions to it would be, and if there are other ways to apply it to your life and to our life. And so with that, we'll wrap up Bible Today for today. I heard Rachel had a lot to say today, and so I'm excited to see what she has said. And with that, we'll have our second break. And, you know, the song to go into our second break is I Will Live Here in Providence.
The truth shines forevermore. Every day I lived my life loving the Lord. We fulfilled rapture through love. I'll live with Him forever. God fulfilled His great purpose for the earth. This new history, this is where hope and joy shine so bright. I will live here in Providence, serving the Spirit and the Son, always loving them. Now this history is my home. Since our love is eternal, I will live here evermore in the Lord's embrace. God fulfilled His great purpose for the earth. This new history, this is where hope and joy shine so bright. I will live here in Providence, serving the Spirit and the Son, always loving them. Now this history is my home. Since our love is eternal, I will live here evermore in the Lord's embrace. Since our love is eternal, I will live here evermore in the Lord's embrace.
Hey y'all, Rachel here. Welcome back everyone to 2G Talks. Of course, if you haven't already, please feel free to leave a like and comment. Now I hope that everyone is having a wonderful Tuesday and start to your week. We're actually going to go ahead and begin 2G Talks with our own mini segment, right? Our Sunsonym Talks. Because I'm very excited to announce this. We have our very first ever guest testimonial. Yes, this Sunsonym Talks is going to come all the way from Angie in Macau, China. So at this time, I will go ahead and read Angie's testimony on her behalf. Hello from Macau. This is Angie. I have many stories to share, all my own stories with Sunsonym. Actually, I'm writing a book on it, but it's in Chinese. This testimony is from 2019. The words of the teacher at that time said, "When you come to Womindong, don't just watch, but work. Because outsiders can only watch, since the bride is the master, so she will work together." At that time, I went with several Taiwanese groups, which were about 150 to 200 people. We arranged to pick pebbles on the sports field in the morning because the teacher had done this in the past. because the teacher was afraid that his disciples and lives would be injured while exercising on the sports field. So the teacher would pick up pebbles on the playground. He truly takes care of everyone with God's love. There was no schedule in the afternoon, so everyone watched the teacher work on the sports field. At that time, the teacher was pruning pine trees near the prayer mountain on the sports field. At that time, I remembered the teacher's words. Don't just watch, work. Because outsiders can only watch, and since the bride is the master, she will work together with the Lord. So while I was looking at the teacher, I continued to pick up pebbles on the ground. It was really amazing. Every pebble I picked up was almost heart-shaped. From where I was looking at the teacher, that is, the sports field near the Holy Sun stone, I picked it up at a location on the side, and I picked it up at the holy pool while walking. Almost all the small stones I picked up were heart-shaped. I didn't take a photo of it at the time, but I really felt it was amazing because I picked it up in the morning. None of the stones were heart-shaped in the morning. Maybe only one of the 20 pebbles I picked up were heart-shaped. But now, for every 10 pebbles I picked up, 5 to 8 are heart-shaped. It really was amazing. I have many stories, too. Thank you to the Holy Trinity, Heaven, and the Lord who let me testify. This is Angie from Macau, China. So yes, shout out to Angie. Thank you for sharing. It is truly, honestly, so incredible to hear others' stories as they testify for the Lord. And I think, how perfect is it that this is the final week of October, which, as we know, is the month of giving glory. I think it's also really important to, again, emphasize what Angie was saying in her testimony. Right? We cannot just be people who simply stand on the sidelines and just watch or kind of expect Sunsonim or other leaders to do all the work. We all have to become people who raise our level in accordance to God's will and work diligently for this history. And I think it fits perfectly with the Sunday message that was given this week, right? It was titled, Just as the Earth Spins, Do the Work That Needs to Be Done Every Day. Now, the whole message, if we remember, Sunsonim was stressing about the importance of how diligently it is that we must run spiritually for this history. How we have to make ourselves into the highest level brides. And how, of course, this can only be done as we diligently work. So again, thank you so much, Angie, for sharing. And of course, if you were inspired by hearing Angie's story and wish to share your own stories together with Sunsonim, please feel free to leave a comment. Or I've actually finally received the access to 2G Talks email. Very exciting. So if you're not that keen on leaving comments, no worries. Feel free to shoot me an email there, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. The link can be found in the description below. So, moving on to our second part of 2G Talks, I actually wanted to go ahead and reach out to you and see if y'all could actually help me out with something and give me some advice. Now, as most of you know, in America, Sunsonim has officially formed the Second Gen Department. As I am part of the leaders group, there's a lot of different projects that we all wish to complete for the sake of Second Gen. One of the more prominent and larger projects that we've been working on, which I can finally announce, is that we will be having our very first official American Providence Second Gen Department retreat. Yes, we are going to be having a retreat. And of course, whenever it comes to retreats, there's many different parts and sections and things to get done. I specifically am spearheading a lot of the activities or games that the Second Gen will be playing. Or I shouldn't say spearheading. I really just jumped at the opportunity to do so. I have so many ideas and games that I want to play. I think it has to do with the fact that I'm Gen Z. I like to think being Gen Z naturally entails that I'm on social media a lot, specifically Instagram, probably more than I should be. But I like to believe that God is continuously using social media to send me reel after reel of different activities to implement within our second gen retreat. Many of which are really simple, easy, fun, and the more dangerous, the better. Just kidding. I don't want to endanger any precious second gen or have any lawsuits. But the thing that I'm most excited to plan and do is an escape room. Now, if you don't know what an escape room is, it's an interactive game where players can solve puzzles, find clues to complete a mission, and then escape within a set time. And I really, really want to use this medium as a new way to connect with second gen, both physically and spiritually. Which is kind of funny because I personally don't, or I'm not really good at escape rooms, but I think I would really enjoy planning an escape room. But this is where I need y'all's help, okay? So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing kind of the bare bones of the escape room that I have, which means I have to spoil a little bit. So if you happen to be a second gen listening, I'm going to pull my rank card. I'm going to ask you to leave. You cannot use this to spoil it for yourself and cheat. Okay, now that they all left, everyone, let's go ahead and we're going to huddle to discuss. So, our retreat theme is hidden treasure. We really want second gen to be able to see that Providence is a hidden treasure, realize and come to understand Sansanim more and see how he is a hidden treasure, but also find the hidden treasures within themselves. So my escape room has to kind of embody all of that, along with a multitude of things that the other leaders have requested. So this includes things like research, which we're hoping to combine with a scavenger hunt / treasure hunt, which has to meet or combine with a Q&A, which also needs to combine, hopefully, with a choose your own adventure, while integrating fun puzzles, games, and clues that are somehow related to the core lessons and doctrines of Providence. Does this sound impossible? Maybe. But I think if we all really put our heads together, it can turn into something really, really great. And like I said, I already have kind of a basic outline or overview of how I want the escape room to run or what I'm imagining. Specifically, I have it formatted based off of the church's physical dimensions, which allow us to do a lot of different things. So we can have part of the escape room be inside the sanctuary, but also be outside. And I mean out in the outdoors. So I'm thinking of starting this escape room within the sanctuary, where we can begin with second gen dividing into different teams. Now I have my notes here. So I'm just going to go ahead and read my chicken scratch and hopefully this works. Again, this is just the bare bones. I have not planned any specific activity or puzzle. This is just kind of the general outline. So ideally, we want to have second gen in teams where they start in the sanctuary. And we're going to have them start in the sanctuary by a couple of options. They can either research the Bible, research some documents, perhaps that we give them for maybe heaven's culture, something in that department. Once they complete their research puzzle or whatnot, then they'll be allowed to exit. I'm going to call it, instead of the sanctuary, the Garden of Eden. So they'll give their answer to the... We're going to have members that will be helping, obviously, facilitate this escape room so that it's not just second gen running wild, running amok, and creating a mess. So we're going to have kind of guardian angels. So we'll have some people standing at the door before the second gen can leave the sanctuary, or again, the Garden of Eden, and those are going to be like the angels with the flaming swords of fire. And the second gen team will give their answer to the angel. The angel will say yes or no, right? And perhaps a penalty can be given. I was thinking maybe penalties could be something like if they get 3 wrong attempts in any situation, the guardian angel can give them a card that says 2-minute penalty. And I want to kind of make it say like, you did things according to your own will. Pray and convene with God. So then it adds on to their time, right? Because in escape rooms, you want to get out before a certain time. And I'm thinking if we have teams, probably the team that wins will be the team that is the fastest in general. Anyways, once they get out of the sanctuary, then they would be able to be in the outdoors. At this church, there's like a giant field. And this is where that scavenger hunt would come in. So one of the leaders really wanted to do a scavenger hunt with eggs. Maybe we can do something different, but I think that we could do colored eggs, and each team would need to collect at least one of each color. And ideally, right, we want to have something of importance within the eggs, perhaps a question that makes up a code or a riddle that will help them to solve the next puzzle. Or maybe questions related to core doctrines that they have to answer correctly to then move on to the next puzzle. But because this is the case, for each team to collect one of each color, we probably also have to add a number to it. So a team, for example, if they're team number 1, they would have to get an egg that is yellow 1 or green 1. Or if you're team 2, you would have to find egg that is red number 2. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so that way we can keep everything, all the questions can be concise. Nobody's getting double questions or riddles or anything like that. So once the team finds their amazingly hidden eggs and are able to answer whichever riddle or question that's found within it, then that question will allow them to find that riddle, puzzle, allow them to find their next thing, which I believe can either be a key or maybe a combination lock. Once they figure out that combination lock, or once they figure out where the key is, there will be another puzzle which has them find where the key leads to, or where the combination leads to. So I'm thinking some teams can be directed or led to like a chest, treasure chest, and then maybe some teams could be led or directed to a room. So it's just like everyone is everywhere. And again, I'm imagining there's going to be guardian angels, quote unquote, adults following them around who know kind of the answers and things. Of course, the adults, the guardian angels, right? They don't talk to us, most of us. So they also wouldn't be able to talk to the teams. But if the teams pray or ask or perhaps do a certain qualification or something like that, then the guardian angel can help to inspire. Again, no talking, but that guardian angel can help to inspire. Anyways, so ideally, once all the teams are able to find their specific chest or room that they were led to, it's going to lead them or give them that prize at the very end. Now, I'm thinking that I want this prize for each of the teams to actually just be a small piece of a larger puzzle. So that means that actually every single team has to finish so that we can put this prize all together so that they can really get the full picture. That's what I'm imagining happening overall. And of course, I do see this being kind of confusing and complicated, but I really want to make this as fun and intricate as possible. I even have the idea of, well, of course it depends on how many teams we have, but each of the different second gen teams would be kind of set on and this is where the choose your own adventure comes in, although they're not really choosing their own adventure, but we would be giving them different paths that second gen go on. So if you have 4 different teams, each team would be set on a different path. For example, team number 1 would be going on the path of a second gen who leaves Providence and struggles, and so maybe their questions are more tailored to that. Or maybe we have team number 2 go on the path of a second gen who was really rebellious but then came back to providence. Or team number 3 is a second gen that's on the path of always really diligently loving God but going through tribulations and difficulties. Or team number 4, we have a second gen who's persecuted a lot. Like, these are kind of the real life applications that I want to combine and embed within the escape room. Because ideally, once they all come together and they get that final puzzle piece that they have to put together to get that final prize, I want them to see that even though as second gen, we go on all our own different paths. We're all pioneers of our own paths, paving the way. Right? In Providence, because Providence has not been around for a long time. Almost half a century by now, right? And so because of that, we're all people who are trying to figure out how faith can work here on this physical world. Or if a second gen or even a member wants to be a doctor, how do we apply that to being a bride of God? Or how is it if you want to find a career in the arts? How do you combine that or integrate that into your life of being a bride of God? So it can be really difficult when we're trying to do things or go into the unknown, places that no one has ever done or gone to. And so I wanted to take that kind of uncertainty and inevitably things that they will all go through and apply it to this escape room game to hopefully show them that at the end, you have second gen that leave, you know, second gen that stay, second gen that go through trials and tribulations, second gen that are persecuted. In the end, all of our paths converge and they all end up according to God's will, right? No matter what. And I think I talked about this at one of my prior podcasts where I talked about how whether you're a second gen who believes or not, you still have God so deeply ingrained within yourself. You just can't help but be a second gen for the rest of your life, even if you want to deny it. And so I wanted to take this sentiment of how God is always going to be with us. He's always going to be a part of us. He is who we are, and put that into this game. I hope I wasn't too confusing. That's my bare bones. There's more, of course, but I've already spoken for quite a while. Again, as you heard, I don't have any specific puzzles or activities or anything planned. But if you have ideas on what puzzles we could do, what riddles, what research things second gen could do, or even prizes, a prize that all the second gen teams have to put together to get their full prize, that'd be great. Because again, I really want this to be fun physically, but I also want them to see how this escape room can reach a spiritual side for them or ignite a sort of spiritual awakening within them. And even get them to start questioning themselves and start reflecting on themselves and looking inward, putting God at their center and core. I'm almost hesitant to share this with you guys because once I announce it, it means I really have to do it. And it definitely sounds very ambitious. And I'm a little nervous that it's going to end up like a train wreck. But funny enough, as I say those words, I'm reminded of Sons of Nim and the Ambition Masterpiece. Right? It fell over so many times. 5 times it fell, but he built it up 6 times. Never giving up. Being so ambitious and determined, not caring what anyone of the world or even his followers thought. Sons of Nim stayed centered on fulfilling only God's will. So in an extremely miniaturized version, I also want to fulfill God's absolute will of saving lives and more specifically saving second gen. So with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up 2G Talks for this week. I really hope that you'll have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday and week together with the Lord. Bye, y'all.
sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when